discussion agenda. We've got monthly financial reports, Exhibit F, and Ms. Rawls is ready for that.
Yes, ma'am. Chairwoman Hammond, Board of Trustees, you have in your packets the April 30th, 2021 revenue and expenditure summaries. As you can see on the revenue summary, we are higher than we were this same time last year. We're at 86% of our revenues collected as of April 30th. And when we look at the expenditures, we are lower than we were this time last year. So that's another good sign, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Good. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah,
Ms.
I
Huddle?
do-
Oh,
I'm
I'm sorry. You'll be next. I saw.
Ladies first.
Ms. Rawls, I was going to ask on the first page at the bottom, there's a operational balance transfer of $3 million, and just wanted to see if you could offer some more information on that.
That was the operational transfer that was approved last year in October to pay for the $1,000 employee appreciation bonus in December.
And that is,
My question was just why we were at the end of a financial year, and I was wondering why this has nothing to do with the district. I was just wondering why the state funds, lag behind, because I think, if I'm correct, July 1 is the start of the next fiscal year.
Yes, sir.
And, I realized that you compared, you had comparative receipts, from last year to this year, but my question was just, in general, why would that be? Why would we not receive the funds from the state that were already approved,
Remember, this was April 30th, so we had the May receipts and the June receipts, and once
So
the
you'll
June's
see.
posted, we
Okay.
should be closer to 100% on all of those lines.
Okay, so that'll be, I got you.
They do make one payment in July. They call it the 13th month as part of state business, but it's minimal. And the majority of your EFA line or your that top line there will be fulfilled by the end of June.
Okay, thank you.
any other questions for Ms. Rawls? All right, so that was for discussion only. The item 15, status update on temporary substitute services contract. Ms. Rawls, if you don't mind, if you'll just give us an overview on that?
Yes, ma'am. We put out an RFP for a substitute services contract. I believe that closed on the 18th, if I'm not mistaken. There were 5 proposals received, and they are currently being reviewed. We are getting close to finishing our review of that, and we'll be making an award in the very near future. I'll be happy to answer general questions, but I cannot go into specifics at this time.
Right, contractual things, yeah. Anybody got a question, though, for Ms. Ross on that? If not, that's great. We'll look forward to, when you get it all for the details,
Yes,
we'll
ma'am.
look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. You're such an asset to our district. We appreciate you. 16, discussion regarding parents and student safety concerns of students across the district, and I think Dr. Harris is going to take that on for us. And Dr. Harris, I know as we had a conversation at the officers meeting, and you were kind enough, you were our representative, and we had some discussion and some public participation questions about, about bullying and about. So that, to me, goes in with safety. So I know you've kind of prepared an overview for the public, and then if there's any questions.
Absolutely, thank you. And I do recognize that I'm also that which stands in between this moment and the adjournment of this meeting. So I will certainly be very brief in our remarks. As it relates to safety concerns of students across our district, I think it's important that we take this moment to highlight a policy, which is our student behavior code. And I think if we can overview that in this particular moment and give some ideas as to what's included and give some emphasis to particular topics such as bullying, I think that will help us, and that will certainly go a long way with our students, parents, staff, and general community. I will share with you that our student behavior code is a manual that's reviewed annually, and while I'm no longer the expert in the area, I think I can get through the conversation on tonight. Our student services officer leads this for us on behalf of the district, and it's inclusive of the latest in terms of trends and local, state, and national trends. related to student safety and other matters related to students. And it does also include information that comes from legal counsel, support from legal counsel, as well as our School Boards Association. Now, I have here the most recent edition of our Student Behavior Code. It's broken into categories, and our categories are our elementary and intermediate. That's K through 5. It's broken into our second category, intermediate and middle, our 6th through 8th grade students. Our high school students, 9 through 12, as well as transportation discipline. And all of those categories pertain to, in one way or another, incidents or issues that might pertain to issues that would occur on school property, school-related events, and again, on district transportation. Now, this manual can be found on our district webpage, as well as it can be made available by way of hard copy. Now, the interesting thing about these categories, each one of the 4 categories that I share with you have levels of offenses. And those levels range from the greater, the more egregious violations to the lesser, if you will, violations. So, for instance, our level 3 violations, which are highest level violations, are those violations that are most egregious, and they do, in fact, involve law enforcement. Mid-range violations or offenses are considered our level 2 violations, which may, in fact, involve law enforcement. Not always, but may. And throughout this handbook, you will see that they are identified by an asterisk as those that do, in fact, include law enforcement. And then, of course, our level 1 violations are those which are our lowest level, and they are typically handled at our schools. They're school-based interventions. I think this conversation has a lot to do with some of the conversations that many of us have had related to the topic of bullying. And so I did want to highlight that a moment, and I do want to give an official working definition of bullying on tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Specifically, in the Discipline Code, as it has been recommended and referred by our School Boards Association, that violation is considered harassment, intimidation, and bullying. So it does involve and can involve other areas, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And it's clearly defined as this. It's a gesture, a written, verbal, physical, or sexual act, or electronic communication to include cyberbullying. So that is our working definition of that. Now, bullying oftentimes can be a single incident. However, I think law enforcement would certainly support us here, and legal counsel as well, that in most instances you want to consider a pattern of behaviors or a pattern of actions or incidents to warrant and make a case, if you will, for harassment, intimidation, and or bullying. Now, throughout our handbook, there are areas of consequences that are specific to the grade level or the grade of the student. So obviously they do differ as you look at elementary and intermediate, where the range is from a parent conference to as much as up to 5 days out of school suspension. Those things can occur elementary through intermediate. However, at the intermediate or middle grade, which again we're looking at grades 6 through 8, it changes a bit because our students are a little bit older. They have a better understanding as to what's going on and what's happening. And so the ranges of offenses may be up to 5 days out of school suspension, perhaps with a recommendation for expulsion. However, if there's a second violation, should that be the case, then it is a range of 6 to 10 days out of school suspension with a recommendation for expulsion. So it differs significantly from the elementary and intermediate. You'll see a different shift at the high school level, where our ranges are up to 8 days of out-of-school suspension, potentially with a recommendation for expulsion as well. A second violation, should that be the case, it is an automatic, it is a recommendation for expulsion. So I have given you ideas in terms of levels, categories, levels, a definition, and what the consequences look like, a very brief and cursory highlight of that. I think where the rubber really meets the road in our school district and quite anywhere where there is any conversation about harassment, intimidation, or bullying is in its process and procedures. What do I do when I experience, when I witness, or I observe a bullying incident or taking place in a school? I'd like to share with the community that any student, parent, and or guardian who experiences or observes bullying, harassment, or intimidation should report that directly to a teacher, to an administrator, or other school official. And that report can be made either verbally and or in writing. Either will suffice. If, in fact, I am a school employee and I experience and or I witness and observe a incident of bullying, harassment, and/or intimidation, then I am to report that to that school administrator. But as well, I'd like to offer that anyone who's employed by the school district, so if we have our coordinators or our directors or other persons who are out and about in schools, as they oftentimes are, and they witness, observe, or experience bullying, there is a role and a process for them as well, and that is to report it to the school administrator and/or the district administrator. So what I've said in terms of processes and procedures involves all of us. And when it comes to harassment, intimidation, and bullying, it is the responsibility of all of us to report that in terms of the process and plan that we have by way of our student discipline code. Now, I like to conclude by simply saying that with this, I think that the discipline code is a very viable option and gives us very clear and detailed specific ways in which to handle issues, whether they're level 3, level 2, or level 1 offenses. But what we'd like to do, and we look forward to, is going over and beyond just what the student discipline code has to say to us. And you have heard by our director, Van Holden, just a few weeks ago, that by way of the strategic plan that he presented to this board, that we're looking forward to making certain that bullying topics and conversations are a part of action plans, if we are part of the strategic plan. So we look forward to including it there. We've had a series of parent workshops where our school social workers and our school counseling department and others in mental health case managers have also assisted in providing parent workshops to date that have been highly participated by a number of parents, particularly in this most recent COVID year. They've done a lot of virtual parent workshops, which had a lot of traction, and we certainly look forward to doing more of those as well. And then we've been very, very fortunate in this district, as well as other districts, to receive some funds by way of our ESSER funding that will allow us an opportunity to really hone into our socio-emotional wellness of our students and our staff and our general community, so that we might use those funds to address some of the areas that are related to harassment, intimidation, bullying, as well as others, not as a standalone, but we want to incorporate them into the conversations that we're looking for, the activities and the events that we're looking forward to sponsoring by way of the use of these funds. So there are a number of different things that we anticipate doing and that we are currently doing that will address the issues related to student safety. We believe that the student discipline code is a very viable option, and it is reviewed annually, and we certainly look forward to having that review and in place for the coming year as well. So I think with that, Madam Chair, I will conclude by way of my comments as it relates to student safety in the district, as it relates to Cross School District 5.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. I would ask you this. Let's say there's a parent, and you were here, if a parent, and it may be a perception, it may be real, but they feel like there's been an ongoing bullying situation, and they've gone to there's always that you go to the teacher and then the principal. Would you recommend steps if a parent didn't feel heard for whatever reason? And sometimes it's really they never got to the right person. But, I thought so. Our hearts broke at that last meeting where we heard from a child and we heard from parents. So I'd like to maybe, for anybody listening, what you'd recommend if they felt not being heard at whatever wherever they start, where could they end up rather than, the board, there's nothing wrong with coming and speaking here. I don't mean that, but we can't act. The board doesn't act on that. We act on the policies that protect the child. So I'd like you to tell us like a step-by-step they could do if they felt unheard.
Certainly. I do agree, as we've indicated, and I've heard you say as well, that we certainly want to consider our first point of contact. Sure. It perhaps may be a teacher. There is something that happens in the hallway or in the classroom or in the lunchroom or on the bus for that matter. So you have a bus driver who serves as a point of contact. Certainly if a parent does not feel heard, then I certainly would agree with going to that school administrator is your next point of contact. We have the assistant principals and administrative assistants and the principal who are there. There are also school resource officers who are there who you can at least report that to. Their role And we have several who are assisting us, and some of our safety officers who are outstanding, former deputies as well. They are available. Should you see them in school, to also say, hey, here's what's happening to me. I don't feel like I've been heard. I've shared this with this person or this group. And then certainly the district office is available for that. We have, as I've mentioned, a student services director who oversees our discipline for us and is in and about our schools on a regular and routine basis. And certainly, obviously, I supervise that role in that area in planning and administration. If it has gone through all of those channels, I have certainly made myself available as well, having delved into student discipline in prior years also. So I think there are
Thank you.
several levels in which we could do that.
I think that's good for people to hear, because sometimes they may not feel like they were heard, and then they want to know the process.
Sure.
Anybody, now, I just wanted to make that statement. Mr. Lovelace?
Yes, in relation to a prevention support program, does the district have anyone, consultants contracted for job enrichment, instructions, and counseling to teachers and administrators and parenting classes? Do we have a consultant that we have awarded a contract to at this time?
Not at this time. Not at this time. In conversations, yes, but awarded, no.
And have we put an RFP out for
sir.
that?
Just initial conversations about the what-ifs, if you will, or how-tos.
I heard you mention ESSER funds. ESSER, I suppose if we're talking about ESSER 3 funds.
That's correct.
All right, then can those,
ESSER 2 in particular. ESSER 2
okay,
in
I'm sorry, I get them
Yeah.
confused too, but anyway, do we have, can we use those funds for that type of services?
Not specifically as a standalone, but we certainly can incorporate into the conversations, which is exactly what we want to do. I mean, you have a parent conference, and we have a captive audience of parents in a workshop, for example, be it in person or in virtual format. Certainly a viable opportunity in which you can incorporate conversations about processes and procedures, about the true and real definition, operating definition of bullying, harassment, and intimidation. Those are kind of strategies and approaches that I think we can use. But as a standalone, and certainly we'll have Ms. Ross to correct me if I'm in error with saying this, as a standalone, it would not be as a standalone and using the ESSER funds alone, but we certainly can incorporate them.
You know, I know that we've just discussed bullying, you know, that's been the topic du jour basically, but, you know, challenging disciplinary situations, opioids and other substance abuse, suicide, all of those things, you know, we are concerned that they need to be encompassed and that we need, you know, with some outside sources that might, you know, that might enlighten us. So that was my question. Thank you.
Ms. Huddle, did you have your hand up?
I was actually going to ask about the ESSER as well, so.
Okay, so you got that. How about over on this side? Any questions? Mr. Hogan? Hines? Ms. Gardner? Okay.
I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to. I'm going to ask it. I appreciate your review about the policies and procedures that we have in place to address bullying and discipline. And I agree with Chair Hammond's statement that the board doesn't really get involved in those situations. That's more of an operational decision. We help set policies. But I was concerned at the last meeting by the stories that we heard. And I know that there have been discussions about that. Is that something that is being addressed? Because I get the policies, and you presented that very well, but I think that there are concerns among parents that when their child is being bullied, that appropriate measures are not being taken, and it's very hard to have that conversation, you know, in a general sense. But that's what I'm trying to do, because we don't want to go on a case-by-case basis. But can you address that?
Sure.
Address those concerns for parents that are worried that maybe there's a situation in a school that their student isn't necessarily telling them, or that they don't feel like the school or the district has been hearing them? Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Certainly. I think I'll start by saying something, repeating something that you mentioned in your statement or question, is that when it comes to your child, I understand. And administration or district office cannot act fast enough, and I understand that. Specific to what we heard, Your initial part of the question was, has it been addressed? Is it being addressed? I can say that it has been addressed. I have the insight and the hard copy, if you will, of how it has been addressed, when it has been addressed, who addressed it, when, all of those things. So I do have that, and very knowledgeable and aware of all of those cases, the couple that we heard anyway. I will say, again, I think my final response to that, Ms. Blackburn-Hines, is very similar to what I shared with Chairman Hammond just a moment ago in terms of looking at it going from one level to the next. If it is not being addressed at the school, then there are persons who are throughout our district who can assist the schools as well as the parents in addressing any and all of the matters that occur. And when we are aware of it, they are being addressed. Okay. I'm really trying to
Yeah.
dance around that a little bit as best I can, but yes, they are being addressed when we know about it. I
Thank
only
you,
address
Doc.
what I know about.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. I felt like I had asked that same question,
Sure.
just in a different way. Anybody else, though, for Dr. Harris? We appreciate
Ms.
that so
Hammond?
much. Yes, Ms. Huddle? Yeah.
I guess not a question so much as a request maybe that we look at programs, what can we do under ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, and include teachers, because we heard from a lot of students, we heard from some students and their parents. I can't speak for other board members, but I also heard from teachers who feel like they need additional tools or that things aren't consistent. So I just also would ask that we look at it from the perspective of our teachers as well.
That's a good point. And I also applaud the district staff under Dr. Melton's leadership and this board supported it about mental health, more money into mental health. And I applaud the fact that we are moving toward that. It's not enough by any means now, but it is very, very important. And sometimes even some of the children that are bullied, I can just say as a teacher, you can see sometimes that those children may need some type of help that's not related to how they're being bullied, but how the perception is. And I think that's one of the hardest things for teachers. You have to be fair to your children, and sometimes it's not easily identified as much as a teacher tries to do that and take care of everybody. And that's true, as principals have to look into that. And so I really appreciate Dr. Harris talking to us about that tonight. I think it's the beginning of a conversation. I think it's a lot more to go. But I would echo Ms. Huddle. I'm just going to tell you, the only reason I'm on this board is to be a teacher voice. And I know that just with society, I'm not even mentioning the COVID year we've had, but it's more and more parts of a child's life put in the hands of a teacher all day. And they have to be the teacher and be sure they learn the content. They have to be a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a social worker, and a nurse. And so I do think if we could do those ESSER funds, what an opportunity out of this terrible thing we've gone through. At least there could be money that goes to make a teacher's life easier for the sake of children, because we're here for the kids. But honest to goodness, I cannot tell you what heroes teachers and principals and staffs in a school are. So I really echo that. And I want to continue and hope we can put more money into the mental health aspect. See, you didn't do really bad being before the adjournment. You did great. 17, does anybody want to entertain number 17 on there? Mr. Hogan,
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
do I have a second? Ms. Huddle seconds. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? And that's 6 people that said adjourn. Thank y'all.